When we talk about the underbelly of fame, it's hard not to bring up names like Diddy, Harvey Weinstein, and Jeffrey Epstein. These guys, with their lavish lifestyles and seemingly endless connections, have been at the center of some of the most scandalous stories in recent history. But let's be real. While Diddy might be facing the music, the bigger picture is much more troubling. The fact is, these individuals don't operate in a vacuum. Behind every powerful man's misdeeds are countless others, friends, associates, enablers, who choose to turn a blind eye. It's time to recognize that the true crime is not just what's done, but also what's left unspoken. Diddy has always been larger than life. From his beginnings as a producer to becoming a cultural icon, he's crafted a brand that's hard to ignore. But in recent years, he's found himself at the center of some serious allegations that have many shaking their heads in disbelief. It's not just the accusations themselves that are shocking. It's the sheer number of people who have known about his actions and chosen to stay silent. Sound familiar? This is exactly the pattern we saw with Weinstein and Epstein. Harvey Weinstein, a titan in the film industry, spent decades using his power to manipulate and abuse. His fall was monumental, but let's not kid ourselves. He didn't operate alone. There were producers, assistants, and other industry players who were well aware of what he was doing. They knew about the casting couch culture, the intimidation tactics, the cover-ups. And yet, they kept quiet, complicit in his reign of terror. The same goes for Epstein, who, despite being a known predator, continued to move freely in elite circles, all while countless people looked the other way. The silence of those in the know is perhaps the most insidious aspect of this whole mess. The people who chose to ignore the signs, the whispers, the outright admissions, share just as much blame as the individuals committing these heinous acts. It's almost like a game of hot potato, everyone passing the responsibility until it finally lands in the lap of a fall guy. Diddy might be in the hot seat now, but how many of his so-called friends and colleagues are hiding behind the curtains, hoping the spotlight doesn't turn on them? What's particularly disgusting is the way these power dynamics work. In a culture that glorifies wealth and status, there's a pervasive idea that some people are untouchable. They think that as long as they stay in their lane and don't rattle the cage, they'll be fine. They live in fear of losing their own privilege, even if it means turning a blind eye to the suffering of others. It's a grotesque cycle of complicity. So, why do we see Diddy in this position? It's classic scapegoating. When the dust settles, someone needs to take the fall. It's easier to vilify one person, throw them to the wolves, than to confront the uncomfortable truth that a whole ecosystem of complicity exists. We want to believe in the narrative that justice is served when one individual is punished, but it's a facade. The truth is that while Diddy might be facing charges, those who supported him, who stayed silent, are still living their lives with little to no consequences. This isn't just a matter of he said, she said. It's about the systemic failures that allow these stories to persist. The music industry, Hollywood, elite circles, they all thrive on a culture of silence. And as long as that culture exists, there will always be a Diddy, a Weinstein, or an Epstein who feels empowered to act without fear of repercussions. Let's take a moment to consider the broader implications of this complicity. The entertainment industry, like many others, has built its success on the backs of individuals who are often exploited for their talent and ambition. Young artists frequently find themselves in precarious situations, torn between their dreams and the realities of a landscape that often prioritizes power over ethics. The tragic irony is that many people in the industry are aware of this culture. From agents to publicists to fellow artists, there's an unspoken understanding that certain behaviors are tolerated or outright ignored because they serve the greater machine. This creates an environment where exploitation can thrive, often at the expense of vulnerable individuals who lack the power to fight back. It's disgusting to think about the countless victims caught in this web of exploitation and deceit. Every time someone chooses silence over action, they're perpetuating a cycle of abuse. It's disgusting to think that while Diddy might be taking the brunt of the fallout, others who were just as guilty are hiding in plain sight. In this digital age, the media plays a pivotal role in shaping narratives. The stories we consume are often filtered through a lens that prioritizes sensationalism over truth. This can lead to a skewed perception of who is to blame and why. When Diddy is vilified in headlines, it's easy for the public to focus solely on him without considering the larger network of complicity that enables such behavior. Moreover, the public's fascination with celebrity culture often eclipses the real issues at hand. People love to gossip about the latest scandal, but how often do they stop to think about the systemic issues that allow these situations to persist? Social media can amplify voices, but it can also drown out meaningful conversations about accountability and justice. Instead of dissecting the web of silence and complicity, we often settle for surface-level outrage, which does little to enact real change. What's needed is a cultural shift, a willingness to call out not just the individuals who commit these acts, but also the people who enable them. We need to demand accountability not just for the fall guys, but for the whole network that allows such behavior to flourish. Those who know and do nothing are complicit, and it's time they face the music too. The truth is that the entertainment industry, and society at large, needs to start taking responsibility for the environment it creates. It's not enough to wait for a scandal to break and then point fingers. Proactive measures need to be taken to ensure that this kind of behavior is not tolerated. This could mean implementing stricter regulations, fostering a culture of transparency, and creating safe spaces for individuals to come forward without fear of retaliation. This is where we must also focus on supporting the victims. The voices of those who have suffered in silence deserve to be amplified. It's essential to create avenues for them to share their stories without facing the shame and backlash that often accompanies such revelations. By lifting up these voices, we can begin to dismantle the culture of silence that has allowed powerful individuals to thrive while preying on the vulnerable. At the end of the day, this isn't just about Diddy or Weinstein or Epstein. It's about a society that has consistently failed to hold powerful people accountable. It's about the people who enable them, who allow the status quo to persist, all while protecting their own interests. It's a glaring injustice that should anger anyone who cares about accountability and integrity. The narrative of the fall guy is a convenient one for many. It allows society to distance itself from the uncomfortable truth that complicity runs deep. We want to believe that if we can just punish the one bad apple, everything else will be okay. But that's not how this works. The reality is that these people are often just the tip of the iceberg, and until we address the systemic issues that allow such behavior to flourish, we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. In a world where accountability is too often an afterthought, we need to shine a light on the broader implications of these scandals. Diddy might be the fall guy right now, but he's not the only one to blame. The people who knew, who stayed silent, and who allowed these injustices to continue without consequence are just as guilty. It's time to demand more, not just from the individuals at the top, but from everyone who has the power to speak up. Because silence in the face of wrongdoing is the loudest confession of complicity. We have to challenge the narratives that allow these situations to continue unexamined. The conversation cannot end with a scandal. It must evolve into a broader dialogue about accountability, ethics, and responsibility. By confronting the uncomfortable truths and holding not just the fall guys, but everyone who contributes to the problem accountable, we can start to foster a culture where exploitation is no longer tolerated. The journey towards justice and accountability is a long and arduous one, but it starts with us. We must refuse to accept silence as a valid response to wrongdoing. Only then can we hope for a future where power is not abused and where every individual is respected, heard, and protected.